My name is Samantha Woods. We are recording this, so you'll have to allow that to happen. And I'm the director for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, and I want to welcome you to our first ever virtual Campfire Story event. We are so excited to be celebrating our 50th anniversary with this special evening of storytelling focused on the theme, nature. What could go wrong? While this is a free event, we hope you will donate generously tonight to protect local waters. Right now, all donations are being matched dollar for dollar. So here's your chance to double your impact with your gift today and make a pledge right now. The link will be in the chat. Plus, your pledge of $100 or more tonight will open the door for you to our VIP breakout room for a moderated Q&A with the speakers after their storytelling. Or you can text pledge 100 to 781-808-3194. In addition to our great storytellers tonight, we'll also be sharing our 50th celebration movie, short film. The best way to see the speakers and the movie is to use the speaker view in Zoom, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You will be muted throughout this, and only the speakers will be able to speak. If you have any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat. I want to put out a special thank you to our sponsors, including Campanelli Associates, the Hanover Company, Axiom Architects, and our 50th film sponsors, including Rebecca Bedell and Alex Steinberg, Barbara Vinyl, in loving memory of her husband, Cat Vinyl, and Trillium Studios. We will be sharing that film after our storytellers, so stay with us. The North and South Rivers Watershed Association began as a group of 200 local citizens 50 years ago. Today, the organization has grown to more than 1,900 members strong across our region, making us one of the largest environmental organizations on Boston's South Shore. With its supporters, the NSRWA strives to act as a catalyst for change by providing water education programming to over 3,000 students, getting hundreds of youth outdoors and on the water every year, and serving as a strong voice for restoring and protecting our rivers and coastal waters. And here's a fun little fact. Did you know that nearly 250,000 people live in the towns that are in the watershed and rely on our water resources right here? So tonight, I want to start with our first storyteller, Peter Kelly Detweiler. Peter is a sustainable energy consultant, a lecturer, and author of a forthcoming book on the sustainable energy transition. He's also a former president and board member of the NSRWA and an avowed 4 seasons river rat, rowing on the North River every month of the year. In the past decade, he has missed 1 February and 1 March. That's a lot of rowing. Peter has paddled the Wampanoag Canoe Passage that connects Massachusetts Bay to the Narragansett Bay, and tonight's story highlights his first attempt in 35 years. His campfire story is entitled, A Romp in the Swamp, What Could Possibly Go Wrong? Let's give a warm Zoom welcome to our first campfire storyteller, Peter Kelly Detweiler.
Thank you, Sam. So the Wampanoag Canoe Passage is a 72-mile Indian waterway that have been used for eons that connects the North River all the way from the Driftway, from the Spit to Dighton Rock down in the Taunton River. And if you traverse it, you actually go up through the headwaters of the North River and then cross through a bunch of swamps and bogs and ultimately make it through the Setauket and down to the Dighton, to Dighton Rock, 72 miles or so later. So I'd done this a number of times as a child, as a Boy Scout with Scoutmaster Tom Clark, who rediscovered the route, and then hadn't done it, as Sam mentioned, for 35 years. And then one day, after Nick Tyack had rediscovered it for NSRWA and done it for a fundraiser, he moved on to college, and Sam called me up and said, hey, Pete, Nick's no longer in the picture. Would you be interested in doing a fundraiser and taking that trip again? So without much thought, which was a good thing, I say to her, yeah, absolutely, I'm in. And so I call my neighbor Tom, and I get the son of one of my rowing buddies and a colleague from work, and I pitch them, hey, you want to go on this 70+ mile 3-day canoe trip with me? Sleeping bags, tents, it'll be really fun. 70 miles of paddling over 3 days. So we all get together and we get a big send off from the whole team of NSRWA folks at the Driftway. And then we paddle up the river with the tide, a beautiful sunny day, get to the Stone Bridge, Mike and Mary Marsh's house. We have a wonderful cookout that night with beer and wine, go home, have a nice rest. And the next morning, my wife, Julie, and another friend drop us back off. We load the canoes with all of our gear and head up the river, merrily paddling away. Well, you get past the crotch pretty quickly. And after a very short period after that, the river gets really windy, and pretty soon it's kind of hard to figure out the next step, which is the stream that goes from there up to the Route 14 herring run. It's actually not one stream, it's 5 or 6. And so we get out of our canoes very shortly because we're going through windy, tighter and tighter turns, and the water kind of gives way to branches and overhanging poison ivy and just dense thicket like what you see behind me, full of spiders too, which I hadn't anticipated. And pretty soon the boats are full of muck because we're climbing in and we're climbing out. They're full of spiders, they're full of branches, and it's really hard to figure out where we're going. One other thing I forgot to mention is this is about 3 weeks after the herring run, where 200,000 herring course up the river and through the herring brook to spawn. And then they all swim back down again to the ocean. Well, most of them do, but not all. And the ones that die are right there where we are crawling through and pushing through the mud. So it's kind of a aromatic present. So at one point, the gang's getting a little bit unhappy with me because I'd promised them a paddle, and this is not what we're involved in right now. We're just pushing canoes through mud, and you can hear the screeching sound of branches on aluminum is something that's, you got to hear it to understand it. And I go ahead of the team because I don't want to take another false path. I've already done that once or twice. And I'm crawling on my hands and knees because there's an overhang of branches, and if I get really low and I'm right in the water, I can get up ahead and see maybe it opens it up. But of course it doesn't. Well, eventually, after many, many hours of pushing the boats through, we get up to the herring run, Route 14. Nice. We roll down to the water there. Then finally we get the canoes, lift them over Route 14, get back in the stream, and it's just as bad on the other side as was what we left, to my horror. So we're pushing up through that. We got our loppers, we're cutting all the bush and pulling it aside. And I notice at this point, people are really unhappy. And meanwhile, the sun is getting low in the sky. And we get up to Mountain View Ave in Pembroke. Some of you know where that is, right past the shopping center. We're not even close to where I think we're supposed to be for our first night of camping. Poor planning on my part. What could possibly go wrong? And I call Julie and say, hey, honey, you're going to have to help us out. We're going to sleep at home tonight. So she cheerfully shows up with a friend. We stash the canoes under the culvert, in the culvert under Mountain View Ave, and jump in the car, smelling like dead herring. And she drives us back home, and we retrace the route. About 10 minutes into this trip, after we spend all day pushing these canoes, we drive, surprisingly, right by Mike and Mary's house. And Julie looks at me curiously and says, completely innocently, with no malice intended, wait, isn't this where I dropped you off this morning? It only took us 10 minutes to get there by car. So we get home, we strip off all of our dirty and really stinky clothes, get the warm showers, get the pizzas, get the beer, and we're looking forward to a really nice sleep. And my neighbor Tom heads out onto the porch to go home, and he turns and he looks at me and Julie and he says, you know, I'm gonna go home, and I kind of hope that my house catches on fire tonight with me in it, because I don't want to do this tomorrow. But he did show up the next day. The next day was actually worse than the beginning. But we finally make it down to Dighton Rock, or close to it, after the 72 miles and celebrate our passage. And we've done it since, and I'm here to tell you, come join 4th, 5th, and 6th of 2021. So be there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was fun to recount and relive with you your Wampanoag Canoe Trail passage. Peter has always been a steadfast supporter of the organization and is an avowed river herring migration nut. He's so obsessed. One year when the fish ladder was broken, he spent hours, night and day, volunteering to scoop them up and toss them over the dam so they could make it upstream. In fact, this year also, as part of our effort to raise awareness about restoring their populations, we installed an underwater camera in one of the local herring runs and had over 800 youth from local schools help us count them online. So we went remote with our river herring count this year, and that was really fun. Remember that you can still join us for the Q&A session by pledging $100 and have your support matched dollar for dollar. We have a group of very generous donors who've put forward a matching challenge of $25,000. If you text the words pledge 100, that's pledge 100, all one word, and the 100 is the numbers 100, to 781-808-3194, and then you follow the link, and then you'll be able to join us afterwards so you can pepper these wonderful storytellers with questions about their adventures. So next up, I'd like to introduce our next storyteller. I'd like to welcome our next storyteller, Alice Clinton, or Allie, as she is better known. She's a 22-year-old university student from Hull, Massachusetts, where she grew up along the Weir River, making frequent trips around to rivers and marshes throughout Eastern Massachusetts. She's currently a fifth-year theater performance major and American Sign Language English interpreting major at Northeastern University in Boston. She hopes to use these degrees to become an actor, interpreter, theater maker, and advocate for accessibility and performance of all forms. She gets all the nature she can through the Arnold Arboretum by her house, but loves coming home to the South Shore and cherishes all her childhood memories of birdwatching, kayaking, and roaming through the mudflats. Her story tonight is called Man Overboard. Allie, take it away.
Thank you. So, I'm 11 years old, and I've gone to River Adventures Camp every year since I was old enough. Kayaking the North and South Rivers is one of the best parts of my summer, and I cannot wait. I hop off the bus and inhale the slightly salty air of the marsh that's just a few dozen feet from the parking lot. It's the first day of camp this year, and we're learning how to buckle our life preservers, best practices for getting caught in currents, and most importantly, how to do a tea rescue if someone's boat overturns. I chatter to my new friends about how we'll do that, and then we'll spend the second half of the day kayaking around as we start to unload the big yellow and red kayaks from the trailer. Wobbling under the load and the awkwardness of our puffy life vests, we get all our boats lined up by the shore. Then comes the lecture. Our main counselor is a young man who seems impossibly old to my small 11-year-old eyes, but he's probably no more than 25. He wears thick, round glasses that glint in the sunlight. He welcomes us to river camp and explains some of our basic safety rules and camp rules, and then invites us into our boats. Tea rescues, he says, while we're all lined up in the water, are very important before we head out onto the river. Does anyone know why? And I raise my gangly arm with a wave. If someone's boat flips over so we can get them back in. I'm cocky. I've already done this camp before, and I know what's coming next. Right, he says, continuing with his explanation. He pairs us up, and we go through the motions. First, someone has to flip over their kayak, leaving middle school giggles echoing over the water's surface. I put the tail end of the overturned boat up onto my boat, while the person in the water holds down on the other end, making the water rush out. We then help each other to flip it over, and we line the now empty kayak up along my own, parallel. And then comes the tricky part. Using my weight as leverage, the fallen kayaker has to pull themselves up and into the boat. We all struggle through the exercises, laughing and grunting with effort. All right, guys, looks great, our counselor calls. I think you guys are ready to get out there. Finally, the time comes that this lesson is over and I get to do what I'm waiting for, heading off down the river. Second in line behind the counselor, I am more than eager to show off how much I know. 5 minutes later, and the river is white with foam. There are brown rocks dotting the surface and the water rushes haphazardly between them. Rapids. We all chatter nervously. There's no way we're getting through that. Our leader shakes his head. It's okay, guys, just a little rapids. All we have to do is aim our kayaks straight and we'll slide right through, no problem, okay? I'll show you, and then you can follow me. Just as he says that, paddling himself into the white peaks, his kayak flips entirely over, sending him splashing into the water. We all stare straight ahead, mouths dropped open. Seconds later, he resurfaces without his glasses and clings to the side of his boat. I'm okay. Allie, can you come help? I freeze. Sure, I've done this camp for years, and yeah, I've done the tea rescue practice a million times, but I've never really done it. Not when it mattered, not when our teacher wasn't there to help, not when our teacher was the one I had to rescue. I couldn't do it. He calls again, Allie, come over here. I paddle over, my brain scrambling for the right steps and the right order. His boat goes onto mine, lift up the end, get the water out, grab the bailer just in case, then flip it back and put it alongside my kayak. I grip the plastic tight. How's he gonna pull himself in when I'm so small? I can't weigh more than 90 pounds. I push down with all of my might against the pull of his body getting into the boat. And finally he's in. He's out of the water, he's safe. He flashes me a big smile that I sheepishly return, and we paddle back towards the group, who look on with nerves. That, my friends, is how you do a tea rescue. And then all the kids congratulate me as we head back to the beach. And for hours, we can't go anywhere since our counselor can't drive without his glasses. But the whole time, I can't stop thinking about what just happened. I never thought in a million years that I'd ever actually have to do any of those safety things I learned. Those lessons were huge hypotheticals, only one small part of that first day of fun of going to camp. And if a flip did happen at some point, well, the adults were there to save us. But it was left to me, a little girl. I did that. I saved the day. Wow. All of us are capable of being the hero, no matter what, no matter how small, no matter how young, no matter how scared we might be. Thank you.
That was so awesome, Allie. I'm giving you a little reaction clap. People can do that. I know it's not as exciting as being here in person, but I want to thank you. Fun little fact, Allie is actually my neighbor. And yes, her mom's still speaking to me after this man overboard story happened. And she was one of the first to join in the NSRWA's youth outdoor education programs, but not the last. Every year, the NSRWA visits over 2,500 fifth graders on the South Shore from 12 communities to teach them about their water. And this summer, over 250 youth were provided fun outdoor exploration programs to learn about their watershed, something they really needed this year, something we all enjoyed this year, nature. Just like Allie did when she was younger, although hopefully without the same man overboard experience. Well done, Allie. That was a beautiful telling. Thank you. So next up, our next storyteller is John Turco. And John is one of the most sought after corporate acts in New England and one of the busiest comedians in the Northeast. He's performed not just at top clubs, but at the Bushnell Theater in Hartford, Connecticut, the Cape Cod Melody Tent in Hyannis, the South Shore Music Circus in Cohasset, the Majestic Theater in Manchester, New Hampshire, and at more than 100 colleges. In addition, John has worked in films, including A Civil Action and Boondock Saints. When not making people laugh, which apparently is a lot of the time, John is also actively involved in a number of civic and community organizations across the South Shore. He sits on the boards for Friendship Home, South Shore YMCA, and is actively involved in the South Shore Support Services, Plymouth ARC, Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless, Prom Angels, the Genesis Fund, Pan Mass Challenge, and the Charles River Center. In 2017, John was honored by South Shore Support Services as their Person of the Year and by Health Imperatives as their Purple Tie and Purple Purse Award recipient. which celebrates those whose work has changed the lives of people impacted by domestic violence. We are so excited to have John join us this evening to share. I'm also so impressed with John. I hope he'll join our board if he can fit it in. Welcome, John, for his Campfire story, Best Intentions, Poor Execution. Go for it, John.
Did you just ask me to join your board?
Yeah.
Is that an invite?
Do you have any more time?
Oh yeah, I got plenty of time. Just let me know where and when.
It doesn't. Well, we have Zoom meetings regularly.
All right, I can Zoom from anywhere.
All right, you go for it. Thank you.
All right, so yeah, best intentions, poor execution. So I don't think my story is going to be as eloquent as the first two, but I thought it was funny. So when I was a kid, if you remember Hurricane Gloria, back in I think it was '86, we decided to go outside in the yard and play football because we all wanted to be Doug Flutie and throw the ball as far as we could. And you could throw the ball a long way when there's an 80-mile-an-hour wind at your back and twigs and sticks are blowing over your head. So we get out there, played a football game in the yard, threw the ball as far as I could. It went over the house. It was probably the best thing ever. And it came down and landed on the windshield of my dad's car and smashed the windshield. That was best intentions, poor execution. So the next day, I wanted to make up for it. We still had some weather going. It was kind of a fall day. It was windy. Looked like it was going to rain. My dad was outside mowing the lawn, and I needed to atone for my sins. So looked like it was going to rain. I ran out to his car. I rolled up the windows so the rain wouldn't get in and mess up the interior. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, my dad did a pass on the lawnmower by the car. The blade picked up a rock, shot a rock out of the blade pan right through the window that I had just rolled up. So once again, best intentions, poor execution. My dad shook his head, but he understood. He understood. He's trying. John's trying. So let's fast forward till about 2 years ago. I was trying to dock a boat. So again, the theme is wind. All right. Wind just doesn't agree with John. So I'm trying to dock my boat. I'm in Situate Harbor. The boat, the wind catches my bow. I start fading into the boat next to me. And I was the new guy. I was a new boater, new guy on the dock. I didn't want to be that guy. And I almost hit the guy next to me. And this was a guy who'd been boating for 40 years. He had this beautiful boat. And I just missed him. But I got it in. I got it in the dock, and I felt awful. So after I cleaned up the boat, I went over and I apologized. I said, "Hey, I'm sorry." And he said, "For what?" I said, "Well, I almost hit you." And this is where boaters are cool. He said, "Yeah, but you didn't hit me, so it's okay." So I'm thinking, all right, when I get done, cleaning everything up, I'm going to go across the street and buy him a drink. There was a bar across the street. This was in Situate, the Situate. We walk across the street. I buy him a drink. We have some great laughs, and we become friends. And after we have a few drinks, we go back out. He walks down to his boat because that's where he lives. He had this beautiful boat. I get in my car to drive away. I put the car in reverse. I backed right into his car. And you can't make that up. And the next day, I came down to apologize. I said, "Look, let me buy you guys something nice for your house." They lived in Hanover, but they won't tell me where they live. And I don't know why. And that's all I have to say about that. Best intentions, poor execution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the moral of that story is don't let John come and mow your lawn or park your boat or park your car.
Don't let me near you. Just stop.
John, thank you for sharing.
Right. Pull into Joe's. Right.
Thank you so much, John, for telling your story. Remember that you can still join us for the Q&A session by pledging $100 and have your support matched dollar for dollar if you text pledge 100 to 781-808-3194 and follow the link. That's in the chat. This is kind of like the WGBH model, right? Where, the mamas and the papas sing and then somebody gets up and makes the plea. So that's what we're doing here. John, thank you so much. That was super fun. And we're going to move on to our next story.
You're very welcome.
I'll be in touch about the board membership.
Can't wait.
Well, I see you're already on the river. Okay. Thanks so much. Okay, so our next storyteller is actually joining us all the way from Florida's Nature Coast. Her name is Pam Larson. Pam has been a successful realtor on the South Shore for many years, and always been a nature lover. Behind the scenes, she's an accomplished bow hunter and fisher woman, having won the Massachusetts Governor's Cup twice, once for the largest bluefish, which is a freshwater fish, and once for reeling in a 786-pound bluefin tuna. Wow. That, she said, took her about 2.5, maybe almost 3 hours. Pam has been an avid birdwatcher for over 40 years and has traveled to more than 50 countries. It was difficult for Pam to actually pick a story from all of her adventures, from being rounded up by indigenous pygmies in Uganda to motorcycling from the Andes to the Amazon. Pam surely has some stories to tell, but tonight she'll share with us one of her international nature adventures entitled A Very Merry Venezuelan Venture. Go ahead, Pam.
Well, this tale also takes place in 1986. I was with my then husband, Mike, in Venezuela. Up in the Andes, we're about 14,000 feet, very high up there, very thin, cold air. And I really wanted to see the torrent duck, which is found in only a few high alpine locations in South America. So we're driving around in our rental car, looking through raging rivers and little torrents, and then we see a pair of ducks on a rock. There they are, beautiful pair of black and white striped heads, beautiful red bills, binoculars out. Wow, what good looks, what good looks. Oh, let me get a picture, let me get a picture. So I get out of the car with my camera, take a few steps in, I'm a little woozy. I'm starting to realize what 14,000 feet actually is. And I look down, and I don't know how many times I've used a camera, hundreds, thousands. I can't for the life of me think how to even turn this thing on. I'm like, oh, oh. I actually felt like I had just completed about 60 minutes of a high-intensity aerobics class. Unreal. So later that evening, we go back to our guest house. We check in. I'm getting ready for bed. I take the top off my toothpaste, and it goes all over the place just from the extreme difference in pressure. And that's just what my brain felt. That was my brain on altitude. So then a few days later, we're coming down out of the Andes, and now we're in the Alpine Meadow area. And it's beautiful with yellow wildflowers, just a clear, pristine blue sky, no clouds. And I look off in the distance, oh, look, beautiful herd of llamas. Oh, let's get some pictures of the llamas. So I get out of the car and I'm over there and I'm picking delicate wildflowers and I'm feeding this cute little herd of llamas. And I happen to glance up over my shoulder. There's a huge, big male llama on the top of the crest of the mountain. He takes one look, he starts trotting. I know he's galloping, he's charging at me, and I'm just standing there paralyzed, just transfixed. I can't move, mesmerized, and he came right up to me, and I'm sure it took a split second, but it took like 5 minutes, and he looked at me, and I'm thinking, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? And I thought, he's thinking, oh boy, is she a danger to my group here? Or, honest to God, I swear that he looked me up and down and he thought, maybe I should make a nice addition to my harem. In any event, he decides to go charging past me and starts attacking my husband, Mike, who screams and starts running away. And I said, Mike, stop, you can't outrun a llama, you can't outrun a llama, stop. So he stops and he turns around, and this big llama, I mean, it's tall, 6 feet tall, and it's got this big camelid head with these giant bulging eyes and these huge teeth, and you would think it was going to go and start biting at him, but no, it went and it backed up and it's butting him with his chest, and it's coming up and it's butting him with the chest, trying to get him down on the ground. So I come up and I grab a branch and I'm beating this thing, and Mike's having a fist fight with it, and finally it has enough and it takes off. Oh, that's it. Poor Mike, he's really had enough, and he's starting to get upset. What's the matter with you? You call this a vacation? Can't you be like other women and just want to be on the beach at the Hilton sipping a pina colada? Poor Mike. Is he going to survive one of these Pam's we're all going to die adventures? few days after that, we meet up with this couple in Caracas, and we're going to go down to Amazonas. They agree to accompany us on a plane. So we fly into Puerto Ayacucho, which is the capital of the Amazonas region, kind of like a frontier outpost, muddy roads, very rustic. So that evening, we're outside on the side of one of the roads, and we're just having a little dinner. And we're at rough wooden plank tables. And down at the end of the table is a fellow with a big 55-gallon drum, boiling up a big drum full of fish. And he has this trident-like spear, and he's spearing the fish, flopping them onto our plates. And we're eating them up. Oh, this is delicious. This is delicious. So take some more of that sauce. How's the sauce? Oh, the sauce is great. A little spicy, but good. Well, we'll take a little closer look at the sauce. Okay, oh, wow. The sauce is actually made up from the bodies of dead red ants, but it was still good anyway. So in the meantime, off in the distance, I'm hearing all the people are talking about this big Indian festival that's coming up. And it's going to be all of the tribes and all of the traditional finery, the Piaroa, the Guahibo, the Yanomami, the Bari. I'm like really excited. I'd love to see this. Now, these are the fellows with the big plumes of the birds, feathered headdresses, the bowl haircuts, the palm needles going through the nose, sticking out of the chins, and with any luck at all, a lip disc or plate. So, and the other thing that they do there during this festival is they grind up the seeds of the chacruna vine into a fine paste, and they take blowguns and they blow the seeds, the powder up into each other's nostrils, and then they can go into a hallucinogenic state, and they do the traditional dances and chanting, and this can go up for as long as a week. So I'm all excited. The next morning, get into our dugout canoe, and we're paddling down, and we have the couple that came with us that speak English to Spanish, our driver who speaks Spanish to Indian, and then the dugout canoe guide, and he's an Indian. So we're going along the Orinoco River, one of the large tributaries of the Amazon, and it's everything you think the Amazon would be, with the humidity and the heat and the palm fronds and the trees and the overhanging branches, but it's quite wide. And on the other side of the river, going through some rapids, is an Indian family. Now these dugouts are 40 feet long, and they're going through a rapids, and it's a whole extended family, and they just sit bolt upright, and they don't have any expressions or anything, and they're just going through the rapids, just bolt upright. You wonder if anything happened, they just keep bobbing along. So in the meantime, I noticed there's a lot of talking going on in our canoe. And then the next thing I know, we're turning around and we're going back. We're not going to the festival. And I'm saying, what's going on? Why aren't we going to this festival? What's the matter? So the Spanish interpreter looks at me and said about the Indian guide, he's saying, not good idea. We go to a festival. And I said, why? What could possibly go wrong? And he said, Chief CU may decide he want baby with blue eyes. Thank you.
That was so funny. You know, we actually have a Venezuelan on our staff, Gabriela Silva.
Yes, Gabby.
Yeah. So just tell me, I want to know, what do red ants taste like?
They were spicy, a little crunchy, spicy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, that is quite a story, Pam. I think we'll invite you back for more because you obviously have so many good stories to tell. I have to say, when I was on the phone with Pam talking to her earlier, she was telling me a few other ones, and I, was like, wow, there are so many good stories to choose from. Hard to choose which one to share. That was fun. Thank you so much. And I guess Mike didn't make it through. Eventually, he did finally decide that vacationing with you was a little much. All right. Well, thank you again for sharing that wonderful story with us. I hope you have lots more adventures like that in the future. Okay. So next up, we're going to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Gordon. Jeff is an NSRWA board member and volunteers with a simple gesture. Jeff Gordon has been the principal of Gordon Atlantic Insurance Agency since 1987. Jeff is a lifelong Norwellian and an avid outdoorsman, spending much of his time split between our local rivers and enjoying the nature of New Hampshire, where he and his wife Kay have hiked many of the presidential mountains, 4,000 footers. Jeff started fishing for striped bass from the banks of the North River at Rocky Reach in Norwell. Rocky Reach is where Allie had her man overboard experience, by the way. He did that with his dad as a boy, and he will be sharing a story entitled A Big Fish Story. Take it away, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Sam. The striped bass is a great American sport fish. Stripers spawn in the Chesapeake Bay region, and they migrate up each year in the springtime to feed in the estuarial waters off New England, like the North and South rivers. Now, the odds of actually catching a striped bass are affected by a lot of different factors. In mid-season, tides are really big. I kind of like the first hour after slack high myself. But there's a lot of other things. Water temperature, air pressure, prevailing winds. There's a lot of different factors. In early season, these days, it seems to be the light. The bite seems to be on only at dusk and dawn. So, and the only thing that anybody's catching right now are the schoolies, the little guys, the 12 to 20 inch or so fish that they come up in schools in the migration a little bit early. That's about all there is. But anyway, so I'm out there, it's late afternoon, early evening. It's a beautiful day. The sky's getting a little bit gray, and the light is beginning to slip away, and it's just the water is falling out of the river fast. It's like mid-tide falling out. Water is ink black, but it's a nice early season. I've been out maybe 3 or 4 times. Got a couple of bumps. I lost one the other night. It was kind of a bummer, but that's just the way it goes. But I'm just kind of enjoying the routine, taking it all in. The smell of the salt marsh, that smell. When all of a sudden, wham, zzz, off goes something. The first thing I know is that this is no schoolie. This is a holdover. This fish spent last winter here, maybe the last 3 or 4 winters. This thing is stripping line like there's no tomorrow. He's going to take my $7 sinking crystal minnow right out to the Atlantic Ocean if I don't slow him down. So I'm cranking down the drag on my rod. I've got my hand on the reel. And finally, after there's about 10% of line left on my reel before he stops stripping it, when he slows down, and I'm able to begin the arduous task of bringing that fish back. And this is a long thing to bring him back. Anyway, after I don't know how long it was, he's pretty close. He's maybe 15, 20 yards out. And I'm thinking, okay, he's still got some fight in him, but I'm still bringing him in when my phone rings. Now, one thing you got to understand is my son, Ben, at this point, is at Logan Airport. And this is the first trip he's ever taken without the family. So he's on his own. But I'm thinking to myself, you know something, Ben? I'm not taking 2 hands off this rod. You're on your own. Even if the TSA has you hanging by your thumbs in the rubber room out back, I'm not taking my hands off this rod. Zzz, off goes the fish again. Going downstream, same drill. I've got the drag cranked down as far as I can. I've got my hand on this. About 10% left, he stops stripping line. I start the process again. Bringing this fish back. Bringing him back. So after the second retrieve, he's coming in pretty close, quite a bit closer. And then he's maybe 10 yards offshore. I'm looking down, and that's when he does the eye roll. And while he's checking me out, I look at him and I'm like, there's no way I'm getting that fish on this bank at mid-tide with this tackle. So I climb down into the mud because I got to be right at water's edge. So I climb down zzz, as he takes off on his third takeoff. So again, same drill, bring him back slowly, arduous, long process. Finally, I bring him in, And he's, you know, we're down at the shore and I see this magnificent, beautiful fish. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a trophy fish. There's about this much hook left in his lips. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to get the specs on this thing. But then I realize he's so played. If I go up on the bank to get my tape and my scale, I'm going to kill this fish. And I got a rule. The first fish of the season, you always give back to the fish gods. And so I decided instead, what am I going to do? I'm going to take my camera, stick it on the bank, put it on a selfie and a timer, and I lean down and I take this picture. And so I'm thinking to myself, I got to get this fish alive. So we go back down to water's edge and I bring him back and forth in the water. And when you bring a fish back and forth into the water, you get oxygen into their gills, and sometimes you can resuscitate them. It's kind of like, you know, CPR for a fish. So anyway, sure enough, after doing this just a few times, he gives a powerful swoosh of his tail and off he goes. And I watch downstream just to see, you know, if there's fins up, no fins up. And I'm thinking, you know something? I think that fish made it. I didn't get the size or anything else. But you know something? It's a great start to the season. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And then I think, what about Ben? And so I grab my phone again and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I see OKs at Logan Airport. And I realized, okay, the missed call, it wasn't Ben. It's just my neighbor, Steve. He's down at Squires, you know, our local watering hole over in Hanover. And he had said, hey, I'm down at Squires with a couple of the boys. Why don't you come on down and have a beer? And so instead of calling him back, I said, you know, I'm going to text him. And I text him. I go, hey, sorry, I couldn't take the call. I was busy. And I send this picture to Steve. And he passes it around the table and he's like, wait a minute. There's no way that Jeff caught this fish way upriver, because I know where he fishes. There's no way he caught that fish. And they pass it around the table. And half of them were like, you know, maybe he did. And half of them were like, no way, that's a cutout. Then the phone goes around the bar. Same thing. Half are saying, well, maybe he caught that. And half are saying, no way did he catch that in the upper river. But I'm here to tell you, that fish was real and this story is real.
Awesome. I have to say, when I saw that fish, I also was doubting, but I know you too well, so I know it was true. That was a great story and told very well. I love the way you introduced the scenery behind you. I think that was well done, well done. It really warms my heart to hear a story like that, because that was a really big fish. And you know, what do big fish eat, Jeff? They eat fish that like little river herring, right? Little fish.
Little fish.
That's right.
Big fish are good.
That's why Jeff's on our board, because he wants me to make more little river fish so he can catch these big fish. Little fish like river herring, but their populations have been in steep decline and they need our help. That's why the NSRWA has restored habitat for fish like river herring and brook trout by removing 2 dams, and we're working on the 3rd, like right now as we speak, behind the Hanover Mall. These efforts have opened up over 9 miles of river habitat to river herring and allowed them to increase their spawning areas and hopefully their populations over time, so we can all keep catching these big fish. Although I don't know if anybody could catch as big a fish as Jeff did. That was a big one. How much do you think that thing was? You have any guess on the weight on that fish?
Pardon me, I had to unmute. You know, well, I know it was certainly between 42 and 48 inches in length. That I've got a pretty good sense of, and probably north of 50 pounds. Wow. It was heavy. It was heavy when I picked it up.
That's a big fish. Well, I hope I'm going to call her a she, is out there having more baby striped bass so we can all enjoy them for the future.
Me too.
Thanks so much, Jeff. That was a very well told story. All of the storytellers really are so fabulous, and I'm so thankful to all of them for coming and sharing these personal stories with us, and really working hard to entertain you and to entertain all of us here, and to connect us more with nature, which is what our organization is all about. Remember that you can still join us for the Q&A session by pledging $100 and have your support matched dollar for dollar if you do text pledge 100 to 781-808-3194 and follow the link. So with that, I'd like to introduce our final keynote campfire storyteller, Jeff Corwin. Many of you know Jeff as a global leader in conservation, recognized for 25 years of celebrated television series from Animal Planet, Travel Channel, Food Network, CNN, NBC, and Discovery Channel. Currently, Jeff is the creator and executive producer of National Geo Wild's Alaska Animal Rescue and executive producer and host of ABC's Ocean Treks. Jeff has authored more than 10 books, including the critically acclaimed exploration of endangered species entitled 100 Heartbeats, which also became an NBC documentary. Jeff grew up right here on the South Shore in Norwell and currently resides with his family on the North and South Rivers. Jeff, a warm welcome to you in your campfire story, which is entitled Spooned by an Elephant, an intriguing title. Take it away, Jeff. Oh, Jeff, we'll have to unmute you. Hold on.
How's that? Did that work?
We didn't quite.
Now
you're unmuted.
going?
Now we can hear you.
Good. I mean, I just want to say I'm delighted to be able to be a part of this evening. The NSRWA is such a great organization. I literally am looking at the great benefit of this work that you guys do, because my backyard is a product of your success and efforts. And unfortunately, my story came up just when my margarita ended. So I'll just have to wing it without the fuel. But the title of my presentation tonight is called Spooned by an Elephant. So for the past 25 years, I've hosted a number of television series. And my second TV series, my first was called Going Wild. My second one was called The Jeff Corwin Experience in Animal Planet. And I was so excited about this story. We were in Kenya, had been in Africa for about 6 weeks. We'd gone to Kenya to the Daphne Sheldrake Elephant and Animal Orphanage. Basically, these folks specialized in saving animals, mostly of which were the victims of the black market wildlife trade. And kind of their gold medal achievement was that they figured out how to save baby elephants. Because even if you rescue a baby elephant and you give it security, back then, this would have been in the early 90s, mid 90s, these elephants would often die. They'd only have about a 10 to 15% survival rate because they didn't have the right formula of milk. Well, incredibly, these guys figured out that magical formula that could provide the sustenance to keep these elephants surviving. Now, unfortunately, they still had an unacceptable amount of mortality. And one day in this park, in this orphanage, they had a terrible storm. And so they were so worried that the tent where these elephants would sleep at night in their paddock would blow away, that all the mahouts, these are kind of like the foster moms, and most of them are men, but they're the foster moms. Some of them are former poachers that get a new lease on life. They all have to spend the night with their baby elephants. And lo and behold, the next morning, for the first time, there is no sick elephants. The mortality rate of these elephants decreased dramatically. And they figured out that it literally was a mother's love that saved these elephants. So that was the story we were going to tell for that episode. We were heading there for that ultimate slumber party. So there we are. I get my elephant. It's Raj. Raj is about 3 months old, still has a bit of a dried umbilicus, little belly button there. But Raj weighs, a nice Rubenesque 400 pounds, even though it's a tiny little elephant, has a lot of mass to it and weight. So we're setting up the story to the camera, and they set up a little camera in the corner. And then me and Raj, we lay down in the sort of the scratchy straw in the paddock. And I have this big wool kind of greasy smelling blanket, and I pull that over us. Raj just kind of lays down, and then one of its limbs goes over my chest and the other limb goes over my legs and my thighs. And I'm literally being pinned. I'm being spooned by this elephant. And I was thinking at that moment, how many people in the world right now are experiencing this, being spooned by a baby elephant? And part of me was incredibly ecstatic because I felt this is probably the only time I'll ever do this in my life. But the other part of me was incredible pain and experiencing a stroke because I was literally being spooned by a 300+ pound elephant. So I'm trying to get myself to fall asleep and Raj to fall asleep. And finally, after giving it a bottle about this big that it sucks down in about 25 to 30 seconds, Raj kind of takes a big yawn and then just settles right down, anvil-sized head leaning against my chest. And somehow we managed to fall asleep. Turn my lamppost down, my light down. And in the middle of the night, I'm feeling this incredible pain, blinding pain of being pushed and pounded. And I have no idea what's going on. And so I turn my lamp back on and I look at Raj to see why it's seemingly attacking me. As some of you may know, I don't always have the best of luck with elephants. And I'm trying to figure this out. And I realize that Raj is in a complete night terror, in a complete nightmare. And we forget that animals do dream. I mean, we've seen our dogs sort of running upside down on their back, sound asleep. And Raj was literally having a nightmare. So I didn't know what to do. So I instinctively kind of pulled his head as much as I could into me. And then I cupped his eye to block out any light. I just kind of rubbed his big, long, wiry eyelashes and just kind of cooed in his ear and just purred a little bit to get him to relax and kind of just like, shh, Raj, it's okay, Raj, just relax. And he kind of took a big yawn and then he kind of opened his eyes, looked at me, then kind of laid back again, began to fall asleep. And right before Raj fell asleep, his trunk, which was only about this long. So, you know, on an adult elephant, the trunk is this very deceptive looking organ that looks like a giant fire hose. It's actually one of the most complex organs on the planet. It's articulated by more than 100 different types of tendons and muscles and nerves. And on an adult elephant, it is so sensitive that a bull will waft it over a puddle of cow urine and can detect if she's in season, ready to breed. It can pick up, it's so precise, and it can pick up a grain of rice. I've seen them actually eat cooked grains of rice individually to savor it. And like a bulldozer, it can knock down the tallest acacia tree, as they are the ultimate landscape architects of the savannah. But this was Raj. Raj was an inexperienced trunk about this long. So it kind of flipped around, and as it took one last, before it goes to sleep, gasp, its trunk went up and kind of formed like a little turban, a little beanie on my head. With that digit, it grabbed a lock of my hair and just twisted and kind of calmed itself by twisting my hair into a lock, and then fell sound asleep. And I remember thinking, this was years ago, I will never forget that moment. But life would have it, years later, many adventures later, I kind of did forget about it. Until one day, my daughter Maya, we were now living in Marshfield, or where I live, this part of Marshfield called Marsh Vegas. And my wife was all excited I was home because she had been home nonstop with a 7-week-old baby, has not had a chance to go out. So she said, tonight, it's ladies' night. I'm going out with my friends for dinner, going to the Baca, going to the pub. And your job is one thing, and actually two things. When I come home later on, there will not be firemen here putting out a house, and this kid will have a pulse. I said, I can do that. So Natasha goes off, and I'm kind of bored, and it's like, what am I going to do? And I go check on Maya, and she's sound asleep, and I'm kind of like, is she breathing? And she looks all beautiful, like a little sleeping little puff adder in her crib. And I check on her, and I'm like, I kind of tap her. I'm like, Maya, Maya, Maya. And she kind of rattles up. I'm like, oh, you're awake. So I pick her up. I take her to the living room. I'm watching a movie. I mean, it's only about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. I sit her down and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go get a beverage quickly. So I'm kind of holding her there, and her head's kind of wobbly, and I kind of lean her there, and I run to go to beverage, and she kind of tilts back, and I said, don't worry, I'll be right back. I'm like, Maya Corwin, this is Hannibal Lecter. That's not his face. Go get my cocktail. I come back, and somehow I hear this thud sound, and Maya has miraculously or tragically fallen on the floor. So I don't know how that happened. So I picked her up, and I kind of give her a good little shake, and I realized probably shouldn't shake her too much, and I just kind of rock her back and forth. And so she takes some deep breaths, and then she begins to fall back asleep as I coo in her ear. And then her finger reaches up as she's sort of kind of sucking on her thumb with one hand. With the other, she grabs a lock of my hair and begins to twist it in a knot. And then all of a sudden, this memory that I had all but forgotten washed right back into my life. The story of Raj the elephant. And it kind of refocused me on my life's mission, on what I wanted. Initially, I became fascinated by conservation and more about exploration and discovery because I was amazed by animals and intrigued by wildlife. As I saw the world change and saw what we've done to wildlife, I then changed into a conservationist, and it was about the wildlife. But in that moment, Maya, who now is 17 years old and is a senior, is now applying to colleges. But back then, at 7 months in age, I realized that my mission as a conservationist changed more about her. What would her future be like? What world would she inherit when she becomes an adult? What work must we do to ensure that the wild legacies that we've cherished and used, as was discussed with Jeff about catching great fish, will those fish be there for Maya when she becomes a young woman and an adult? And that was the moment. That was the realization. That is the moment, I think, for all of us as conservationists, as people who care about the landscape. Initially, we do it because of the pleasure, that connection to that aesthetic beauty that is a part of us, in this case, our North and South River. But ultimately, it is for our children. And we live in a very strange time. Here we are, we should all be wearing nice clothes and drinking cocktails and having nice dinners, but we're all in our homes, stuck with our children, driving us crazy, as they are over there. And we're caught up in this pandemic, and the world is upside down politically. But it's moments like that where I look at my backyard, I look at the South River, and I take stock of how truly fortunate I am. And while we face so many challenges today, as it was brought up today in that great story, as I've done this summer, in the 21st century, the age of apocalyptic politics and pandemics, I can walk in my waders and catch a striped bass. I can head to Stellwagen and connect with a tuner. I can look to my right and watch a pair of bald eagle in the marsh, and look to my left and see a pair of nesting osprey, as they've done since the day we've lived here. And it's those moments that remind us how fortunate we are. It's the fuel that inspires us to make great opportunities in the future of conservation based on the successes that we have today. So lastly, for me in that moment, being spooned by an elephant reminds me of the vulnerabilities of life, the importance of being a dad and a parent, and the importance of being a steward for our environment. And while we face so many challenges today, and while the future is not certain for any of our natural splendor around us, today our rivers, our South and North rivers, and the surrounding waters and estuaries that feed into it are healthier than they have been in a century. And that's largely because of NSRWA. So that was my story, my moment with nature. It was with Raj the elephant. And I was going to tell the story about when I took Maya to look for little wild eastern brook trout in the tributaries off the river. And I came back and she had mud from her chin to her toes, but we'll save that for next year, assuming there is no pandemic and we get to hang out in person.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was inspired and inspiring. And we definitely want to get Maya back out there in the mud. That's what we do. We like to get muddy. I think there actually was a time when one of our staff scientists met you out there. I think you were out hunting and she was out doing some brook trout work. And she was so excited. She came back to the office. She's like, Jeff Corwin was out there. That was really a great story. And I think it really rings true for so many of us who work so hard to care about our natural resources. And that isn't just the people who work and get paid. We're blessed, believe me, to have jobs that we can do this. But everybody who, in every day of their life, participates in caring and stewarding for these resources, because it really is something that we all have to work for together. It is something that we all have to do as a united society. So I'd like to share with you now a short film that's dedicated to every person who has worked so hard to improve our waters here over the past 50 years, and to ensure that the next generation will have a natural world that they can depend upon. Please enjoy this 50th anniversary film that celebrates our waters and the people who care for them. And I'm going to ask Susan Darnell if she can share her screen with us, and sit back, get your drink, and have your popcorn while we set this up. Refresh your margaritas. Susan, are you able to share?
What? They're all.
Sam, I'm having challenges finding the video.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, if you
over?
could. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on just a second, peeps, while I also make sure I have my video up. And who knew we would have a pandemic on our 50th anniversary? Okay, looks like I can do it. Is everybody able to see my screen? Hopefully you can. Whoops, actually I need to make sure I enable the sound. Sorry, give me a second. I'll be right back. Coming to your screen. Okay.
Can you make it full screen?
I can. That is full screen, I believe. This is full screen for me. Hopefully it's good for you. Can you see it? Okay.
I have been swimming and fishing in the North River for pretty much as long as I can remember. Back when I was little, our parents said, you don't want to swim in the river for too long because you might get sick. We didn't understand things about coliform and all that stuff. We just knew that you couldn't swim in it for that long and you didn't eat the fish. But today, we can eat the fish out of the river. We can swim in the river all we want. It's a cleaner watershed. This natural resource is so rich, so full of vitality, so full of life. Clean rivers don't come by accident. They need people to take care of them.
When my volunteers go out to count herring, they're spending 10 minutes standing by the side of the river or the fish ladder. It's those quiet moments that helps instill that enthusiasm for the vibrant life of the rivers. Watersheds are invisible boundaries to many people. All of the waters of our coast are connected from Cohasset down to Plymouth. These resources that we depend on also depend on us to stay healthy and stay clean.
When I take a group out, whether it be on the river or out on a trail somewhere around here, everyone becomes an explorer. The rivers, the marshes, the water, it's what engages them. They'll understand how it's all connected, and it's through that understanding that these kids will want to help protect it.
I think every member of my generation has to have some kind of relationship with environmental issues. There's a kind of gloom you feel where you feel like you don't have any control over the issues that the environment is facing. Going out into the rivers and the streams helped make these topics real and personal. And then meeting members of the community that care about these issues, what is initially gloom turns to inspiration.
Definitely remember when I was younger, there was always concern about the water quality. I don't remember people shellfishing down by the mouth of the river because I don't think it was safe. It just feels so great to be able to see my kids getting excited about finding clams, looking forward to the meal we're going to have later on.
When I first moved here, the rivers and the marshes just mesmerized me. You can see every color in the rainbow in the marsh grasses. You know, there are times when it's purple. There are times when it's blue. So it's constantly changing. You know, and the more you look, the more you see the changes, and it draws you in.
The rivers pull us together as a community in so many different ways. They might enjoy walking there, or swimming, or fishing, or doing yoga. And when they gather there together, they often find that they have a lot more in common. In the last 50 years, we as a community have realized that we need to protect the rivers and their watershed.
Oh my gosh. Here it goes.
The rivers themselves are simply the visible essence of something that's much larger than that. And like raindrops in a watershed that collect and come into brooks and streams and eventually run into the river, into the sea itself, we all become part of something larger. Together, we have become unwavering advocates for the waters of the South Shore, keeping them clean and plentiful, not only for today, but for future generations. But that work is constantly threatened, perhaps now more than ever. The solution is the same as it always has been. Educate ourselves about the interconnectedness of our world. Engage with each other to solve the problems. Right here, in the places we live and love. Our futures are forever connected.
Well, that was, I hope, like you, really emotional, sort of not a dry eye in the house after watching that. I think it really tells a wonderful story about how people coming together can make a difference. And here's another little fun fact. the North and South Rivers Watershed Association has improved water quality. That wasn't a myth, that our rivers are now clean enough to swim, boat, and eat from. And some of that work allowed 600 acres of shellfish beds to be opened to recreational harvest after years of closures. So we hope you've enjoyed this evening of Nature Tales and had some good laughs. We are committed to protecting the environment and our watershed so that everyone can continue to experience the joy of getting out in nature and then tell their own amazing campfire stories for generations to come. The need for vigilance and advocacy for our environment and rivers has never been greater. Your donation will directly support the vital work we do together to protect local waters across the South Shore. And right now, as I mentioned, all of the donations are being matched dollar for dollar. So here's your chance to double your impact with your gift today by making a pledge right now. As we've said before, the link is in the chat. And by pledging $100, you can be entered into the VIP breakout room that we'll be going to after this. If you care about clean, sustainable water and swimmable, fishable rivers, please make your donations now. Thanks to you, children and adults will learn more about water conservation and nature, and local residents will get to explore the South Shore in new and exciting ways, and we will advance efforts to restore our rivers and streams. Also, you may be aware, we also have an online auction that's ending this Sunday at midnight. So if you want to do some holiday shopping, please go to our website and give the gift of nature this holiday season and help protect it at the same time, or you can text the word water to the number 22454 to go directly to the auction, or just as I mentioned, go to our website. For those of you who are attending the Q&A, you will see a link inviting you soon. For the rest of you, thank you all for coming tonight and sharing this 50th anniversary celebration with us. We hope to have a series of mini virtual events, so stay tuned for more opportunities to get involved. And we really appreciate you taking the time tonight to enjoy these beautiful stories with all of our wonderful storytellers. Let's give a Zoom round of claps to each and every one of them. I know how much I've enjoyed this evening. And thank you very much. Those